Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and there's been a big conversation this past 24 hours about Xbox's hardware plans. A few former Xbox employees chimed in and gave their opinion, which has created quite the stir online. Fans are really freaking out about this on all sides, so I want to give my perspective on things because a part of this conversation I'd say is a little bit over-exaggerated. At the same time, though, is there at least some merit to it? And I'll give you my own opinion about that later in this video. Now, we also got some news for Nintendo's next big exclusive, and it just really gets more exciting by the day. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go and get right into things, though, starting off with the Witcher 4 Unreal Engine tech demo that was shared a few weeks back. Fans immediately got very excited about that demo, but like we talked about before, you might want to go ahead and pump your brakes. Tech demos, more often than not, do look better than the actual end results for a game. That is worth keeping in mind. Now, that's not to say that it won't look excellent, especially if it launches on next-generation consoles. But there is one key thing that you can take away from that specific demo. CD Projekt Red has now officially confirmed that the region that they showcased is actually in the game. And even though it doesn't represent actual gameplay, it, however, will have a similar art direction. So even if it doesn't end up looking quite as impressive, we should still see something very similar when all is said and done. And I think that's very exciting because, I mean, that demo really does look great, even if it's just from its art direction. Now, we also got a leak from Ubisoft. I mean, they've had a legitimate leak problem here for the last few years, and apparently a new Ghost Recon could possibly release as early as fall of 2026. This is according to Tom Henderson over on Insider Gaming, which is really one of the most reputable sources out there. I mean, still take it for what it's worth, but he said, according to several sources, the game will enter internal alpha in fall of 2025 as Ubisoft sets new internal milestones for its major projects following the announcement that it will delay its major IPs. Ghost Recon, codenamed OVR, is expected to launch sometime in 2026, with sources indicating that the internal alpha to final release could take around 12 months. So in theory, the next Ghost Recon game could launch sometime in fall of 2026. Now, there is some speculation on his part, but apparently he has seen footage for this project. He describes it as being similar to the Modern Warfare series, which, I mean, as long as it's tactical, that should be perfectly fine, or at least in my opinion. I more so take that as it's set in the modern era with modern-day weapons. Either which way, though, hopefully it'll turn out to be a good game. The last entry didn't exactly do so well, and you know that's been the case with a lot of Ubisoft games over the last few years. So I'm sure longtime fans of Ghost Recon will at least be skeptical, but the good news is that seemingly you're not going to have to wait all that much longer to see it yourself. Now, unfortunately, we do have a canceled game to talk about today, and this is from a fairly popular series at that, being Outriders 2. The first game launched into Game Pass a few years back, and it put up some pretty major numbers at the time. Now, I know there was always that question of players versus units sold, but at the time, People Can Fly seemed very happy about its launch, and so much so that they got a sequel greenlit. However, things have since changed quite a bit. Square Enix was the publisher for the first game, and since then, they've largely moved away from Western development. Well, apparently, and unfortunately, this might have included People Can Fly and Outriders 2. Insider Gaming reported that Outriders 2 was canceled. The reasoning hasn't been publicly announced, but several sources have stated that the issue stemmed from alleged funding and communication issues with the game's publisher, Square Enix. So, yeah, a very unfortunate situation for People Can Fly, and I'd really include fans in this as well. I know a lot of people really enjoyed the first game. It's kind of a Gears of War-like experience, and while I definitely don't think it's quite as good, it was still a solid overall game. So I would have liked to have seen what the studio learned from player feedback and how they could have possibly improved upon that experience with an eventual sequel. Unfortunately, though, that's just not going to happen, or at least anytime soon. I mean, you never know if something will be revived later down the road, but it's certainly not going to happen anytime soon. Now, speaking of Xbox a moment ago, let's go talk about them because they've been a part of a volatile conversation this past 24 hours. When it rains, it pours. And in this case, two former Xbox employees chimed in and gave their opinion about Xbox's multi-platform strategy. The first of which comes from Mike Ybarra, which has been a part of Xbox's leadership for years. He said it's been tough to see Xbox confused about what Xbox should be. In other words, are they a publisher or are they a console manufacturer? He believes that they need to pick a lane and then stick to it. The other statement, though, and this is the one that's garnered a lot of attention online, and that's because it really makes for a great headline. What's happening here is that Laura Fryer, which was a part of the OG Xbox team, she made a YouTube video, which I'll go and post below. I recommend watching it because I think that she does give an interesting perspective. But the headline that's going around is that she said that she believes Xbox hardware is essentially dead. She mentioned that she doesn't like Xbox Everywhere's marketing campaign. She talked a lot about the ROG Xbox Ally, and she calls it all marketing and no substance. And she even said, quote unquote, "I don't love watching all of the value that I helped create slowly get eroded away." So, yeah, I mean, these are eye-popping quotes from a previous Xbox employee that helped get Xbox started. And to be fair, I firmly believe that even the current Xbox team isn't all in agreement with their current multi-platform strategy. We have seen leaks that not everybody within Team Xbox agrees with that specific decision. Now, in my opinion, a lot of this is because of Microsoft's upper management. They want a return on investment because they paid a lot of money for Activision Blizzard, hence why there's been so many drastic changes since that buyout. However, I do feel like there's still a bit of an exaggeration when it comes to the idea that Xbox hardware is dead, as is being passed around. The fact remains that Xbox has already announced a next-generation console. Now, there is a debate to be made on whether or not it will find success, but what we know is that it will run Xbox games, including backwards compatibility. They confirmed this. What I'll say is that if any of the rumors are true, that it will also play Steam games, then I think that there isn't an enticing idea behind their next console, just because technically it will be the most compatible console to ever exist. But at the same time, I also understand where she's coming from. Xbox Everywhere, which is mostly what she was complaining about, is basically a marketing campaign that says, well, you don't actually need an Xbox console to play Xbox games. And that's been divisive even within the Xbox community. Now, some people really like the idea, but there's other people that just don't. You know, we've never really seen a company sell a console with a strategy like that. So there has been some concern in whether or not their next console can find success, all while being partially but not entirely multi-platform as they currently are. Now, I do think that they have some enticing ideas for their next console, or at least in theory. Your current Xbox library carrying over, combined with Xbox Game Pass, is a huge thing for longtime Xbox customers that has a lot of games within the Xbox ecosystem. And then the addition of Steam, if that actually turns out to be true, that could be enough to grab an audience. But is that enough to sell tens of millions of consoles? That's where I believe that there is a real debate to be had. It's one thing to transition to this strategy mid-generation. I mean, their current user base is already pretty much locked in. They already bought their consoles. But it's an entirely different thing to launch a brand new console, a new generation, with that same strategy. Because starting next generation, that's when gamers can go back and make a decision for themselves. You could start to see people transition to another platform if they don't like this strategy. We saw that happen to the Xbox 360, to the PlayStation 4. So, I mean, we do need to see how all this plays out. Again, we've never seen something like this before from a console manufacturer. And that's partially why there is a lot of divide within the Xbox community. But that's where I'll ask you all. Do you think Xbox will find success next generation with this current strategy? I expect a lot of differing opinions in the comments below, but try to keep it civil. Let's have a good conversation. Now, one more thing before we go, though. Donkey Kong Bonanza previews are currently rolling out, and most outlets seem to be very impressed. Now, to be fair here, I don't really put a lot of stock into early previews. A lot of outlets really seems to gas up games before they, tear them down in their official review. Redfall was a great example of that. Its previews were also fairly positive, so yeah, I don't really take early impressions to heart. Rather, I think they're just a good way to get more details a little bit early, see some more gameplay, things like that. You can kind of decide for yourself. But that's where things start to get really interesting because it's now been confirmed that the developer is the same team that worked on Mario Odyssey. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about that because it does look very similar. So it's nice to see some kind of confirmation here, but Nintendo, with all of that, still won't confirm who the director is. So now people are speculating that it could only be a part of the previous team, which that would actually be a good thing if true. And let me explain. That could potentially mean that the Mario Odyssey team was split into multiple teams. One that could work on Donkey Kong Bonanza, and then the other one, which could be working on the next 3D Mario. So in other words, this could be an early sign that the next 3D Mario is still relatively close, even though some of the Mario Odyssey team has been working on Donkey Kong Bonanza. So, if true, that would be pretty fantastic, and who knows, maybe all the rumors are actually true in this case. There's been a lot of speculation that a new 3D Mario could release as early as 2026. I'll be honest here, though. I'm actually more excited about Donkey Kong as of this moment, not just because it looks great, because it really does, but also because I've wanted a new 3D Donkey Kong for several decades by this point. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.